Thank you so much for allowing me to come out here and talk a little bit about Nevada drought response. And when I was thinking about this, I go back to 2011 and going into 2012. We had a weather briefing for Division of Emergency Management, and one of the things that that stuck with me was the fellow said that we were fairly confident that we had a 50% chance of wetter than normal year. Other models suggest that we have 50% chance of a drier than normal year. So that kind of drove us crazy in emergency management because we didn't know what the heck to expect. And so, that was at the beginning of the year, and it turned out that we were getting drier and drier as time went on. And my chief decided to say, well, Bill, you are the state emergency management planner. In fact, it says right here is I'm the lead planner, which is a misnomer because I'm the only emergency management planner. I want you to look into this drought situation. Do we have plans for this? And what is the update on this and everything? Well, come to find out that we did have a plan, but it was in 2001. They developed a plan. It hadn't been updated in about 10 years. And Kate Berry over here took the lead with groups from a couple of people from Division of Water Resources and Emergency Management. We're kind of a real diverse group because I know nothing about droughts or water resources or anything to that nature. I know about emergency management. So we decided to get together and put together a plan. It was more of an infrastructure, how we could go about to monitor the drought and to put emergency or response, state response to it. And so it wasn't a response plan, it was an infrastructure plan that we put together so that we can address and mitigate certain response areas. Now we were looking at this and we think, well, it's kind of a dry year, we'll put this together, but it turned out to be much more than we ever thought. So we really got an education as far as how to respond to a drought. In fact, we were the only state in the United States to actively activate our State Emergency Operations Center because of this drought situation. And our components of the drought plan is that we wanted to ensure that we had something that outlines and determines what a drought is, and a system to aggregate how severe that drought is, and to an infrastructure on how to develop certain response entities like the Drought Response Committee and the task forces so that we can monitor and we can make recommendations to the governor. And also establish a framework of what the phases of the drought we had, and we took from various different state plans. Some say that we stole from other plans. I say that we use best practices. So, and we developed this plan that I thought was very simple, but user-friendly. And once again, it didn't put a lot into response because when we go through this, every drought is kind of different. There's different aspects to the parts of the drought where we're going to have certain industries impacted versus others. And we didn't want to put into our response plan something that would tie our hands. So we wanted to be able to use that emergency management model to be able to respond to any drought situation. We put this in there, and Kate, you'll notice this is what you had in your presentation too, is that, and I'm not going to go over what types of drought there are because that's kind of like having a kid with a bottle rocket. try to explain astrophysics to a rocket scientist. I'm not going to do it because I don't know a lot about climatology. So suffice to say, we put these things in a plan and that it's based on science. Our organizational structure is that when we had a reasonable suspicion that the conditions were present that required us to monitor, we established a drought response committee, which was consistent of the state climatologists, individuals from the Division of Water Resources, Agriculture, and the Division of Emergency Management. We also put in, lately, we put in our federal partners from the Farm Services agencies, because we want to make sure that we get an overall response for the state of Nevada. And we also, for our organizational structure, is for ad hoc task forces to be established based on our geography and the different sectors that the drought's going to impact, like agriculture, wildlife, fire, economics. So we wanted to establish those task forces so that we could utilize them as our experts in the different fields. We put together these flow charts to establish how we were going to go from certain phases to the next phase. So in ongoing monitor, we would look at the weekly drought monitor and determine whether or not we were going into this D1 situation. D1 is kind of our trigger where when majority of the different counties go into the D1 situation, which is abnormally dry, that we're going to activate our drought response committee. And that drought response committee, they actively monitor the drought monitor. Then we go into, if it continues on into this D2 area, which is moderate drought, we start looking at establishing the task forces and further monitoring the areas. Some of the monitors that we do is, okay, how much water are we going to put out in the irrigation? Are some of the farmers going to receive less water this year? And there's certain impacts on that. There's going to be certain impacts on wildlife. And one of the biggest things that we found during this situation is that the governor is very interested in sage grouse. You know, if the sage grouse goes under that threatened species list, well, that puts an impact on mining, puts an impact on agriculture, puts an impact on a lot of different things. So that was one of the things that we learned, that the governor was very, very interested in this. And if you notice down here, it says report to the governor. So every point we wanted to make sure that the governor was informed of our activities, what the situation was in the state as far as drought was concerned. Now we go into this drought alert phase, if we get into it. And drought alert phase is where we start looking at, okay, shall we start looking at a drought emergency? And you would think that a drought emergency would be something that is fairly innocuous, as far as you know, we wouldn't get in trouble by declaring a drought emergency. But many of the different counties were very adamant against declaring drought emergencies, particularly about their tourism and to entice different businesses to their area. I think we had a very lengthy discussion with our with our Story County manager because he was very concerned about emergency declarations. So it was a very political type of situation. And then we go into this drought emergency stage. That's where the State Division of Emergency Management takes over from the Drought Response Committee, and we take over emergency response because it becomes an emergency at that point, and we are the response agency for emergency management in the state. And we establish an incident action plan, which is our plan on how to develop our coordinated response for the state. And in this situation, what happened was that we were going to recommend to the governor that we establish for different counties that were affected that they go into a drought emergency. Now, enter in the USDA, which was last year, they changed the definition of drought emergency. And they did it on themselves to declare really the whole state as a drought emergency. And that kind of put a lot of consternation between the state, and we had some pretty intense meetings with our federal partners because it kind of blindsided the governor. But now we are working in concert together so that we're not getting that blind side. We're working together with them and working based on their categorization of drought. So our response, see, this was, somebody told me, I said, well, put it into a perspective that I can understand. And somebody said it was like a flash flood from a drought perspective. It kind of in reverse. It was so dry and that we didn't have any precipitation. The only way we can describe it is like a flash flood event. And I said, that's perfect for me, then I can understand those kind of concepts. So I developed this incident action plan. This was our state's plan on how to manage this particular incident. And we did have an incident number on this, and any resources or costs involved with responding to this drought would be paid for under this under this particular incident. And in that, our mission is to mitigate or respond to the drought effect. And our main purpose was to for life safety, to protect life safety, and then public information provide public information to those affected, and to do some economic mitigation efforts, recovery. Our last thing was to ensure that recovery and mitigation for wildlife. Those were some of our mission areas. And our objectives was to establish a State Emergency Operations Center. And what we do at the State Emergency Operations Center, we don't respond. We coordinate materials and resources for local response. And so that's what we did. We ensured that we coordinated resources, and one of the most important things we did was coordinate information. And this was kind of our organization that we put into it, and it was heavy on, if you've ever been through any incident command system classes, you'll see this is the traditional incident command organization that we utilize. And our common operating picture, to make sure that everyone knew what was happening in the state, we divided our state into 3 different areas: south, northeast, and northwest. And we just developed drought task forces based on those regional areas. And they gave us the information. They really ground truth what occurred. And some of the things that we did was, through that, we made sure that we had an incident report, which is a situational report that went out on a weekly basis. where we were as far as the drought was concerned, what the progress were, and some of the different messages from our partners, the federal partners, for agriculture. And one of the things that we were very concerned about was metropolitan groundwater systems. Now, we found that they were pretty resilient, but many of the different communities were very concerned if after a 6-month period, and we're at this point, that the drought continued and intensified. So we're working again with them to develop those task forces to look at those situations, and we're going to respond accordingly to assist the local response efforts. And that's what I have. So, any questions? Thanks. Yes, sir.
You showed 4 different types of droughts. Are the responses kind of dependent upon what kind of drought it is, or do they happen kind of simultaneously?
Well, you know, that is a question for a climatologist, but for an emergency manager, we don't care what kind of drought it is. It's what the consequence of the drought is. Do we have to provide water to the range? If the farmers can't do it themselves, they don't have money to do that. Do we have to get cattle off the range because the farmer can't do it? They can't get the loans to get them off. If 1,000 head of cattle are going to starve, we're going to have to herd them ourselves. So we're talking about consequence management at that point. Any other question? Yes, ma'am.
Well, emergency response is so incident-based, and I guess I'm wondering if this exercise made some consideration, at the executive level that, if climate change and prolonged drought is more long-term, is there a need for the state-level planning and, for more long-term outside of the incident?
I think because we hadn't addressed this in 10 years. I think that we were just beginning to look at it when we decided, hey, we really got a problem here immediately, and we need to look at that immediate response. I think the mitigation issues are on our horizon because we're seeing more and more of the effect of drought on the local jurisdiction, on the statewide economy. And so I think we actually talked with Clint is that we need to be better at these range management issues so that we take that long look and that we build that economic base that is drought resistant. Yes, sir.
What exactly can you do? What's your ability to respond?
Very, very small. Once again, some of the biggest things that we do is we coordinate information at the State Emergency Operations Center. We also coordinate state and federal response so that it comes from one singular area. And so that we can take what Clint does with Farm Service Agency, and we can help coordinate with them. They have a pretty good coordination organization themselves, but we can help coordinate with our emergency managers from a county level. And also if there's a situation where, and we did have it, we were very concerned of certain municipal water issues because of the water table lowering. We could probably do some mitigation things with that, bring in water or help the municipality in drilling a new well. Other questions? Thank you so much.